Welcome everyone. My name is Victoria, and today we are here on our Product People meetup, our regular Tuesday evening meetup, or at least evening if you're in Europe. Thank you all for coming. I know, happy to see some familiar faces and names. Also happy for all our new guests. Please keep coming and invite your friends. If you like what we do here at the Product People meetup, please support us on Patreon. This helps us to pay for the nice tools that help us run this for free for all guests and also ensure the good quality. If you want to continue product discussions, please join our Telegram chat. It's Get Product People on Telegram. Bring your questions, share gigs, find interesting gigs in product, and meet your colleagues from around the world. Product People is an event builder, a community builder. That's why we organize this event, but we are also a product management consultancy that started in Berlin in 2018. We are currently remote first, operating from Europe, but several different countries. Today we are few in the call. Let me admit more people, but we have also so Mirella is here, our founder. She's in Berlin. I am in Munich. We have also one of our colleagues in Barcelona. We have one of our colleagues in Romania, and we have currently a couple of people in India also working together. So we are very distributed and very diverse company, and that helps us a lot, I think, in bringing a great value to our clients. Our clients are current. Yeah.
In our defense, when we made the slides, the colleagues were in Spain, but then went for the winter in India, and they said that if they're going to be in the house, it at least should be something closer to the family.
Yeah, this year made it very weird. So some people did not really plan to change the location, but had to. What I wanted also to tell you is that we are currently open for new clients. Our team is currently growing. We have taken on a couple new people. So if you know that company needs an interim product manager or is looking for a freelance product manager to help them on the time limited project, please introduce us. We will be happy to get to know new cool companies and help them. And for sure, we will bring them value and help them grow their product in the best possible way. With this, I will stop sharing my screen and invite our speaker of tonight, Anna. Anna will talk about the very important and interesting topic of North Star framework. And over to you, Anna.
Thank you for the intro. Hi, everyone. So the topic of today is going to be how to drive product strategy with the North Star metric framework. Okay, I have apologies if I'm looking in two directions because I have two devices. I have my Keynote on my laptop, but I have to set up my camera and my mic with another device. So bear with me. So a bit about myself. I'm the co-founder and product strategist at JustMad. Super short, together with my life partner, we joined forces and founded JustMad. JustMad is a product design and strategy consultancy, and we help companies innovate better and faster, no matter how big or how small or where they are. For the past 7 years, I've been working with digital products for both B2B and B2C and throughout the whole product lifecycle. So from launch to pre to post product market fit, but also scaling and growth. I'm a remote work coach, and we're fully distributed since day one, which is almost 4 years ago. And I'm absolutely mad about running workshops because I find them super effective and fun. And yes, I love designing workshops, and I'm also a remote facilitator. These are just a couple of clients that we work with. So we have a vast variety of clients that we work with, not only startups, but also big corporates. So just some names here. So we work with banks, we work with Freeletics, probably you know it, it's a German startup, on fitness, Miro, Class Dojo, and so on. So let's see what we're going to cover today. I'm going to look at the most common challenges that product teams struggle with. We're going to dive deep into the North Star metric framework and understand what it is and how to run the workshop. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So at JustMed, we work with dozens of great companies and product teams that every single year. And one thing that they all have in common is that they're all building amazing products, but they also share some common challenges. So very often we hear things that I can connect our day-to-day work with the overall business impact, or we already use OKRs, but somehow we still end up working in silos, or our team success is measured in the numbers of features that we release, so more focus on the output rather than the outcome. We have slow feedback loops, and we do a lot of guesswork. This means that they don't do enough customer research, or they don't involve enough the customer in the whole process. And we mostly focus our efforts on acquisition to achieve growth, so just the top of the funnel, which is not necessarily a good thing. Well, the struggle is absolutely real, and probably working like that might have cut it 15 years ago, but that's because companies had a very low barrier, entry barrier back then. But today, we get bombarded from lots of companies, and they all compete on the same thing, which is our attention. And probably today, like never before, focusing on customer value and UX is critical for a company's survival. And if there's one key takeaway I would like to leave you on this one is that it is crucial to orchestrate your product team's efforts for maximum customer value and, of course, revenue growth. So the challenge is that we have so many initiatives and ideas to work on. It's super easy to fall out of focus. At this point, I assume that you can agree with me that a business purpose is to make money after all. So revenue is crucial for survival, and I'm pretty sure that everyone in a company is trying to influence that. But very often, we find ourselves in the position of working on initiatives that are not, clearly connected with the overall strategy, or we feel that it's hard to find common ground with other peers. So, and since we are, I've mentioned money or the revenue to be more specific, there's one important aspect to understand, and this is the difference between lagging and leading indicators. So a lot of companies focus on monthly recurring revenue as their leading indicator of success, which is not necessarily bad, but there are a couple of problems with that. The first main point about following revenue as the leading indicator for your business success is that revenue can hide what is going under the hood, with your product, and you can miss signals about your product's health and in the long run. And the second point is that if you're trying to improve retention, but only tracking revenue retention, the game is over even before you even started. So revenue is the output of engaged users, and the usage is the input. So therefore, revenue is not a good indicator of future success. We're going to talk a bit later what is actually a good indicator for success. But coming to my previous point, when it comes to bringing everyone together on a common ground, there is no better way than using a story. And if you've read the book, if you didn't, I totally recommend it. It's a fantastic book. And we humans, we transact through stories. And usually what happens in a complex ecosystem, such like a corporate or a bigger startup, everyone in the team has their own story. So the question is, what is a cohesive story? How do all of our stories relate? How do we combine our work to kind of find meaning and to be part of that story? Or how do we all work together and kind of, fit in that story together? Because if we have a cohesive story, people are gonna be able to make decisions a lot more quickly, better, and faster. So part of our job is to help these companies figure out how to find that cohesive story. And probably, as you've guessed from the title, the North Star metric framework allows us just to do that. So with no further ado, introducing the North Star metric framework, your product team's unified story. We like to call it like that. But before I jump into defining the North Star and what it is and how to measure that, just one quick definition from Sean Ellis. He was one of the first people that actually coined the term North Star metric. So by his definition is that the North Star metric is the single metric that best captures the core value that your product delivers to customers. So in other words, a North Star metric is a key measurement of success for product teams in a company. It is the leading indicator of future success. So in other words, remember how we said that revenue is a lagging indicator and it's not necessarily predicting what's going to happen with your company. It's only telling you if it's going well or bad. Well, the North Star metric is the leading indicator of your product success. So this framework will allow you, you and your company to reach business outcomes with customer value in a way that every person, every team, or every department can work in synergy. And their efforts, actions, goals, initiatives are all heading in one direction. So we have everyone pointing in the same direction. think about the North Star metric as a critical juncture, let's call it like that, between the business outcome, which is usually a revenue metric, but also what teams are doing on a day-to-day basis, which is something related to customer value. A couple of things before jumping into the North Star metric framework, what it is not. So the North Star metric is not your roadmap. It is not a software development process. It is not a prioritization framework, although it sounds like a good one. I'm going to show exactly how you just define some metrics and then you're going to prioritize them by using something else. And again, it is not a goal setting framework like OKRs, but it does give you the foundation to set better goals. When it comes to the elements of the North Star metric, what actually makes a good North Star metric, we looked at the definition, and there are 3 things that you have to keep in mind. So the first one, the first important element is that your North Star metric should be aligned with your product vision. The second one, it should measure the moment that a customer gets value from your product. So that's also related to the aha moment. And the third one, your North Star metric should be a leading, not lagging indicator of a future business outcome or that your company cares about. And with no further ado, I'm just going to show you a pretty simple example. And to illustrate this, I'm going to use Spotify because I'm pretty sure that most of you are familiar with the service and probably you're already a Spotify user. So I mentioned before that the North Star should be aligned with your product vision. So in this particular example, how does the vision translate into the North Star metric for them? So for this vision statement, we can also extract the value that the customer is getting. So the first question that we need to ask is, what is the measurable world that we want to create? So in case of the Spotify is give people access to all the music they want all the time in a completely legal and accessible way. We already have the vision and we already understand what's the value that their customers are getting. Okay. Next question we have, how does revenue translate into a North Star metric? So their revenue model is fairly simple and they have a subscription model, and based on their buckets, premium or free, you can see very clearly how engagement is affected depending on the type. So it is safe to say that subscription plays a crucial role when it comes to revenue for Spotify. And now that we've looked at the vision and customer value and revenue model, let's see what would be a good North Star metric for Spotify. Obviously, this is hypothetical and speaking from the example perspective. A good North Star metric for them could be time spent by subscriber listening to music. So we have the revenue element there, we have subscription, right? And we have the amount of time spent by the user listening to content. Let's see if it actually ticks some checkbox. So it measures customers' value, aligns with product vision, and it is a leading indicator of revenue, not revenue itself. So probably at this point, you're thinking, okay, this sounds good in theory, but the product I'm working on is more complex. And you're probably wondering how exactly you can apply the North Star metric without excluding important parts of it. Obviously, there are multiple dimensions of a business that determine its health, and each should be measured by their own key metrics. So we're going to show you how we do that a bit later. But at a minimum, there are 3 key buckets that every product or every product manager should be aware of. So the first one is the breadth of retention, how many people you manage to retain over time. And then we have the depth of engagement, how often they engage with your product. And then monetization. It's not enough to have a bunch of free users that use your product daily if you cannot monetize them. So how does the North Star metric actually account for other dimensions? This was, in fact, my first question when I read about the North Star framework in the first place, because I was curious, okay, but you cannot just focus on one metric. There has to be more than that. And we're going to look at a constellation of metrics. And before jumping into the constellation, explain you how exactly the North Star metric will translate into a bunch of metrics. I just want to explain a bit the difference between the input and the output metrics. So output metrics are the results, and input metrics are the actions that you're going to take in order to impact a certain outcome, if you may, or a specific result. Super basic example with outcomes versus inputs versus inputs is the fitness one. So if you want to get fit, that's a result that's not going to get overnight. So you have to have proper nutrition, you have to regular exercises, and also you need to sleep and rest. Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look on how we can break the North Star metric into actionable input metrics. So if you think about the North Star as a function, you can consider 4 dimensions that will help you define what will impact its growth. So we have breadth, depth, frequency, and efficiency. So product teams need to define those inputs and work to influence them, which in turn will actually drive the impact, will actually drive the North Star metric itself. So when it comes to breadth, we have here volume. How many active or returning users are are taking a particular action in your product? The depth, what's the depth of their engagement? Frequency, how often they engaged, and efficiency, how fast do they succeed. You don't necessarily need to have all 4 of them, but it is recommendable to have at least 3. Okay, coming back to the Spotify example. So the North Star metric, time spent by subscriber listening to music. On the breadth side, we have listeners. So here some input metrics could be number of trial users that will convert to premium subscribers. Then on the depth side, we have content engagement and number of hours per session, and then frequency, listening frequency, and these are the number of sessions per week. Another example from Instacart, very simple one, total monthly items received, not delivered, received, because that's the value I'm getting as a customer. We have here on the breadth side, users placing orders each month. On depth, a number of items within order, orders completed, and percentage of items delivered within time. And how this will translate into a roadmap. So once you have identified what drives the North Star metric, you can take those input metrics and start thinking about what could drive them up. We're going to show you how exactly we do that in the workshop. So the first step, towards sustainable growth is understanding your user behavior, and there's no doubt about that. We've covered what the North Star is and how to break it down into various inputs. But one question that I get super often is, how do I map the North Star metric framework on the customer journey, or in what time or in what moment do I actually start considering the customer journey, or what role does that play in the whole, definition part? So here's a typical customer journey that could look like for any of your products. So after acquisition, your users will become new users. Through our activation flow, they will become current users, and some of them even power users. Some of them you might lose them on the way. They will become dormant. And lastly, we can also have resurrected users, which usually are people that can be resurrected through different strategies, reactivation strategies or resurrection strategies. And some of them can actually turn back into current or even power users. So now that we have the full picture of how users can transition from one state to another, it is important to understand how we can map our team efforts around these different states and figure out how to maximize each step along the way. There are certain thresholds that users have to cross, and obviously the same as I mentioned before, is from not sign up to sign up to casual, casual to core free, and core free to monetize. This is not necessarily applicable to every single product out there, but you can get creative and see how you can map these on your particular product. And we have here different teams focusing on each threshold that they have to cross. So we have acquisition teams, activation teams, engagement teams, and even monetization teams. Now, how does it look in practice? Because I just wrote a lot of concepts here and definitions. Let's take a look at an example before jumping into the workshop template. So what I have here, this is a North Star metric framework for a grocery app. So the long-term impacts that the company is having is the first, is the flat rate fee for each purchase. And their North Star metric is the monthly active users placing 2+ orders per month. See here that they also have a numerical value. Probably this is because they have enough data to understand that then their North Star should be with them at least 2 orders per month. And then we have the team goals: new user on board, new user activated, habit formation, habit temperature, some input metrics that are gonna impact that North Star metric. So for example, for new user onboarded, we have a number of new users who place their first order, number of new users who place multiple orders in month 1. For habit formation, percentage of monthly active users who place multiple orders in month 2. And for habit temperature is number of orders per month per user. And then we have here the user lifecycle, where it belongs, and then potential product initiatives and how teams can actually impact and how teams can influence that. And the thing that I like about the North Star metric framework is that you focus more on the opportunity that you have. So you take the input metric, let's say the first one, number of new users who place their first order. So instead of focusing on one particular feature or one particular solution, you can come up with multiple ideas or initiatives to drive that up. And now what I'm going, sorry about that. Trying to find my mouse on my laptop. Nope, not this one. Okay, I'm gonna move to Miro. I'm gonna show you, yeah, I can see that. This is the workshop template that I kept mentioning, and this is how I define the North Star metric with various teams. You can find this workshop on Miro. I can also paste a link to it after I finish the presentation. And it might seem a lot at the beginning. Just a second to hide something. Okay. It might seem a lot at the beginning, but the workshop takes in between 2 to 4 hours, depending how much you're going to talk during the workshop with your client or your team, if you're not a consultant. So I'm just going to go slowly here. You will see that we have a lot of instructions. Everything is very well documented, so don't worry if you have some questions. You can also reach out to me. Special thanks to Amplitude, because most of my presentation and some content that is available in the workshop comes from their article. However, we did change the order, and we did add some extra steps because we just found it to be more useful this way. So how you start the workshop, obviously you want to put here your company's logo, and then you add the photos of the team members or the participants. If you don't find any pictures with them, I can recommend you to put, superstars or superheroes photos. They will like that. Some quick rules and the agenda. We almost always run a Miro intro, like a mini workshop with a mini training with them, because not everyone is familiar with the tool, and we just want to make sure that they know how to navigate the waters. Basically, this is an infinite canvas. If you haven't seen Miro before, I totally recommend it to check it out. But in case they already know how to use the tool, you can skip this step. The first component is that we have a North Star framework one-on-one. So here we have an intro. This is pretty much a summary of what I've presented before, but feel free to adjust this according to your need. And then before starting the workshop, I also like to take the pulse with them, because I need to understand where they are with their product strategy and how they feel about it and how they measure themselves against that. For this particular workshop, you actually need to do some pre-work. So what I usually do here 1 week before the workshop, or a couple of days, but usually I take 1 week, is to make sure that I understand the product experience map. If it's a huge product, try to simplify it and not put here like this mammoth map. Some OKRs if they have, if not, that's okay. High-level roadmap, just a couple of features where they're trying to where they're trying to go, sorry. And then the audience. And what do I mean by audience? Let's say if we are if you're an ecosystem, let's say like Facebook and LinkedIn, you're not going to have one North Star metric. Actually, in fact, this is the first question that I had, the second question that I had about the North Star metric. What if I'm LinkedIn? I mean, one North Star metric won't work for the whole ecosystem. So you have to identify certain audiences and their job to be done, and then focus on those. So let's say if you're in a business unit or you have multiple products that you work on, probably it's best to set one North Star metric per audience. Okay, then the first exercise that I have here is, I'm not going to go into details on each because it's quite long, and I know that we're running out of time, but the first thing that we cover is the product vision. And even though it seems like a simple exercise at the beginning and probably useless, it is not. Trust me, I've tried it every single time with our clients, and I get surprised every single time about the value that people get from this. So first of all, you just have to understand what's the product vision, and then everyone will extract key learnings from the product vision, and they will vote on what's the most important key learning from that. Then we focus on the core value statement, and here we have some visuals that will help us to understand what's the core value statement that the customer is getting from the product. And we have 3 main games that companies play: attention, productivity, and transaction. And depending on the game that you're playing, you have a different value exchange between the customer and the product. And this is only a support for us when we run the workshop, to identify or actually to help the client and identify what's the core value statement that they are offering to their customers. Then next exercise, the critical event. This is the core action that you want them to take every single time they're using your product. We have here some examples. For example, for Airbnb, booking completed or booking accepted because it's a double-sided platform, Spotify listening to content, Amazon purchase, and Google successful search. Every single participant will have an individual workspace and they can decide what's the critical event that they need to track within the product. And then there's a conversation and we vote and we decide what's the critical event that we're going to move. A quick break. When it comes to monetization, this should be very fast, because probably as a facilitator, you can actually add this one before the workshop starts. It should be very clear how they make money. If not, you should spend some time before the workshop to define how they make money. And then you have the exercise where you define a candidate North Star. Note that it is a candidate because you still need to test it out and see if that's actually the North Star metric that your company should have or product. And everyone here decides on a candidate North Star, and then we have a great conversation around to see if it actually checks some the items that we have on a checklist and see which one should be selected. And then we go into the product formula. This is actually where we spend the most time in the workshop because we need to explain exactly how the formula looks like. And then we have, I have two examples. And here, when it comes to defining the inputs that will influence that North Star metric, this is very interesting. I tried various formats. I've tried formats in which it was an individual exercise, and then everyone just read out what ideas they had. We also try like a group brainstorming. Both work, try it out and see what works for you. The last workshop that we did was actually with a parking app. And we just brainstormed together. We just took every single dimension and we started brainstorming some input metrics that would affect the North Star. And at the end, we get a mood check to see how everyone is feeling. So basically they have their names here and they just put their names underneath the emoji that represents their feeling. And at the end, before closing the workshop, we typically show them how it should look like in action. But more than that, we have a visualization of how exactly this will translate in their work. So we have the North Star metric horizon and bets levels. So what do I mean by bet? Everything here that we do in this workshop, it is an assumption, but a informed assumption about what will drive revenue for the company. So typically we have level 0 bets, and we have this in a time frame of 1-3 years. You should change that, or you should review, not necessarily change, review that every 1 or 3 years. Then we have the level 1 bets. These are the input assumptions that we define that will impact the North Star metric. These should be reviewed 1-3 quarters. And then we have here opportunities. So basically every single team, what they can do, they can select certain inputs and they can come up with opportunities and start working on them on so-called interventions. You don't need to use the exact same name. For example, with some clients that already have some certain processes, or they want to use OKRs because they already have the framework implemented, we're just going to use that. But now they have the inputs, and then now they have the North Star, and they know how to measure success. And how this would look like. Again, this is just an abstract presentation. It's not how the final artifact would look like. This is something usually that lives either in Notion or Confluence, or it can even live in Miro, but it should be a document that everyone has access to. So how it looks like, you take the opportunity or the input that you want to work on, and then you have a board. Every single team will work on one, and you have various ideas or initiatives or features that you can work on, and then you will review and see if the metric actually went up or not. So this is the North Star metric workshop. I hope you find it useful. And now I'm super happy to get any questions from you.
Wow, great, Anna. That was very detailed. And I see people also in the chat right well, because it was very impressive. Thank you for sharing this so generously. I start the questions. I have a practical question. If we want to organize within our company, who do you recommend to lead this workshop?
Yes, so depending on how big is the company, typically if it is a startup, it should be the chief product officer or the CEO usually does the same role when the company is super small. In a bigger company, this should be the chief product officer or a product lead, or someone who who's the authority in the product world in the company.
Thanks. There is a question already from Søren on YouTube. How exactly do you figure out what game a company or product is playing?
Excellent question. Actually, I can, just a second, I have a slide for that, but I skipped it because I want to stay on time. Can I share my screen again?
Sure, go on.
So it's more like, think about the type of engagement that you have with your customer. If you, let's say, if you play the attention game like Netflix and Facebook, it doesn't have to be that their monetization model will be identical. So, for example, for Netflix, even though Netflix versus Facebook, they both play the same game, but they have different monetization models. However, the way they engage, or the core value that they offer to their customers is something to watch on, right? So a typical North Star for that would be total time spent engaging with content, or number of users spending more than 5 minutes a day. These are usually social platforms or content platforms, or products where you have to spend time, where your attention is being traded with revenue. This is this is actually from Social Dilemma. If you haven't watched it, I totally recommend it. Then transactional, the core purpose of the product should be, facilitating a sort of transaction for you, for the customers. And productivity is any tool out there that can help you do a certain job that you can't by yourself. So it can be Slack, Adobe, Salesforce, you name it.
Thank you. I hope, Søren, this answers the question. If you have some follow-up, feel free to write in the chat there. People on Zoom, you're welcome also to switch on your microphone and ask questions with your voice. If you know how to raise your hand, you can start with that, and I will call you then. Also, maybe, okay, I see Rainer has a question. Go on, Rainer.
I have, yeah. So I'm not sure if I got it, because you presented it's massive, and you presented it quite fast.
Yeah.
But to me, it looks a little bit like it could be a perfect framework to actually define OKRs or something like this. So are you using this regularly, or only once and then it's defined forever? Or did I just miss it when you explained that?
Yeah, excellent question. So I would recommend to review it. So let's say if I work with a company that already uses the OKR framework, then I have to adapt the North Star metric. After we define it and we define all the input metrics, I have to adapt their way of working to the new framework. Usually, this is the most difficult part, to be honest. I mean, explaining the framework and running the workshop, it's fairly easy, but then the implementation is what is killing us because people are used to working a certain way, and adding one more framework on top of their, OKR framework, that can add a bit of complexity. If the company doesn't uses OKR, that's perfect, because I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to show you here. I'm a visual person, so I prefer to explain visually. What happens with OKRs? You have them, you set them, at a company level, and then you cascade them, and then you typically have some input, outputs, and outcomes in your OKRs. And some of the KRs you should typically reach out to 90% of the time, then 50% and 10%. That's the whole story behind OKRs. However, with the North Star metric, it's fairly simple. You just take some inputs that you want to, impact and you want to drive up, and you start thinking about opportunities. It's more like a decentralized way of thinking about solutions, rather than just focusing on one thing that, was set 3 months ago. But this is why I put here like forecasted impact of level 2 bets on input OKRs, because this is what OKRs usually are. So one OKR for a fitness app could be, let's say, we want to improve the number of users that are activated this month, for the next 3 months. Sorry, typically they're set on 3 months. You see, here we can have the same thing. Something that can influence the North Star metric is number of active users that will, increase or decrease in the 3 months. So it's more or less the same thing. However, it's just about how you translate it into the day-to-day work and to their current framework. If they don't use OKRs, I don't want to complicate it. I'm just going to make it very simple. I'm just going to add initiatives in a Notion, and I'm just going to explain how the framework works. And then they have this planning board where teams can actually take the opportunities and start working on them, and they can set their own cadence. So for example, they can have reviews every 2 weeks or every 6 weeks and see if they actually drove that metric up or down. If they use OKRs, I'm gonna play by the OKR book. I hope that answered the question.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Anna.
There's a question here. Sorry.
There's one in the chat. Let's take it first. I can read it. So usually you have multiple product teams in a bigger company. Would you suggest formulate a North Star metric for the company or for each team?
Yeah, I think there are two aspects to this question. First of all, multiple product teams in a bigger company, that's okay. It can be the same product. If it is the same product and you have only one sole offering, even if you have multiple segments, again, I'm going to reference to a fitness app or a parking app, or Instagram. Let's take Instagram, for example. Me and my mom both use the same app, but we are different segments for them. But we are the main audience. So the core job to be done is still there. However, if you have multiple products, let's say LinkedIn, so you have the profile builder, and then you have a sales navigator, and I know that they've acquired Linda, and now it's called something else. So they have this portfolio of products underneath the same umbrella that will require a North Star for each individual product or product offering. However, if you have only one product, but you have various product teams, the same way I explained in the presentation, where you can have acquisition or activation or monetization teams, they could all work on one North Star metric.
Mm-hmm.
If you're working on the same job to be done, it should be one North Star metric.
Makes sense. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks a lot for the very detailed presentation as well. I really enjoyed it. I would have, as Weiner as well, I would have questions like how to combine it with what you already have. So when you stay on this very slide, it states even 1 to 3 weeks interventions, which sounds like it could even be down up to sprint level and,
exactly.
and even feature level.
Exactly.
So do you really think this is possible in 4 hours? Because I mean, even the part of going into the product vision is probably taking more than 4 hours in the organizations that I've been working, at least. And then going, so would you go within this frame even on intervention level? Or do you think that's something for later?
If you look at this one, I'm just gonna zoom in. If you look at this one, this is exactly, the last two are OKRs with sprints. The only thing that will add is more clarity on how the product actually grows and what will impact it. And in fact, one thing to keep in mind here, if you define a bunch of input metrics, it can usually happen. The examples that I showed you were quite simple, just for you to understand the framework. But in a workshop, you can come up with quite a handful of input metrics. And the thing is that not all of them are equally important or equally impactful for your North Star metric. And you have to understand that you have to understand your growth model, first of all, and see what drives the most impact and focus on that.
I have a kind of different question.
Sure.
Again, thinking of preparing for the workshop, are there certain typical mistakes people make or something which is high risk that might happen and I should be prepared if I do this at my company?
As a facilitator, first of all, this is not a workshop that anyone can run. So unlike the design sprint, which is fairly easy, it's a recipe, you do it by the book and you just facilitate it and then you can extract yourself from the workshop and from the work that has to be done. This is a bit different. If you want to facilitate this workshop, you should first understand the framework, understand how to explain it, understand how the team works, because again, they're gonna, the biggest challenge that we typically have is for them to implement the framework, not to define the metric, not to run the workshop. So in the preparation, obviously you need to understand, first of all, the product inside out. If you're a consultant, you need to get up to speed with the product ASAP, just map out the whole product experience map, understand what customer, what values, are, what the customer value is, sorry about that. Different stages, if they have multiple offerings. It is also important to see if they use OKRs or what framework of prioritization or objectives are they using. That's super important to see where they're heading. And then some high-level roadmap, because probably if they have something on the roadmap, they're not going to change it. Even if you discover, let's say, something super interesting or something that is not necessarily in their vision right away, you want to consider what they have on the roadmap. Because if you just come up and tell them, this is wrong, we're not going to do this anymore, that's going to make them a bit uncomfortable. And that that's not even feasible. And then, this is super important to understand for who you're going to run the workshop. I mean, for what type of audience you're going to set the North Star metric.
Mm-hmm.
And also, actually, one challenge that I had recently with one client is not necessarily related to the product or the workshop, or not even, all the work that I had to do before the workshop. It was this technical person that was super skeptical about everything. So one recommendation for you, they had no product person in the team. It was a super small company. It was only the CEO, some commercial people, and the CTO. So make sure that if you have a situation in which you have a skeptical person, make sure that you have a presentation and you don't just rely on this quick info here. Because they need to understand why you're doing this and what's the outcome. And what usually I do before, to catch a client, to get a client onboarded, I show, I present an example, and I present before and after what happens and how, the process looks like before doing the whole framework and after.
In this, on this line, do you have some resources that you particularly recommend to present this whole framework to the company to win people over on the site to try this? Yeah, exactly. The question is, I think, partially in the chat. Is there any help material available for implementing this framework template?
Well, first of all, the template itself, probably this recording, and also the presentation that I've showed you. Amplitude has some amazing resources, but when it comes to implementing and convincing your team or your clients, if you're a consultant, to do that, it really boils down to first to understand what their needs are and what are the biggest pain points. But also, I typically run a discovery workshop with them to extract some pain points, not only the pain points that they think they have, but the real pain points that they actually have. One more thing here to add, I didn't talk about this in the presentation because it was a bit out of scope. Having an analytics tool is crucial. So if you just go there and show them some metrics and talk about KPIs and how to measure them and impacting growth, but if you don't have an analytics tool in place, and especially an event-based analytics tool, not Google Analytics, it's going to be very hard to follow up with this because you're not going to measure anything. So that's also an important aspect that you have to keep in mind.
True. Oh, wow. I was going to say we take just one last question, but there are more questions in the chat now. So first one, how do you use OKRs across departments, alignments and issue to solve when OKRs conflicts and readjustments? Okay. That's a very good question, and we get this super often. We don't completely change the OKRs. So let's say if we are like in the mid trimester and they're already set, we just try to adjust some of them and see how that can work. But then what we do, we set the next batch of OKRs for the future. But typically clients that I work with first are super, they're not very comfortable or confident with the framework, but after they see some results and after they understand exactly what we do here and what, what's the outcome of the whole framework itself, not only the workshop, but how it can impact the team and how, everyone's going to get visibility. Anyone is going to know exactly on how they're going to impact the whole business and how their product grows. I think that's one aspect to keep in mind when convincing them to, to start adjusting a bit the OKRs. Good, thanks a lot. The next one, how do you reflect and show that the product development is more focused on value delivery rather than full feature delivery? I guess that's very, very philosophical product question. No, this is a very good question. I actually had this with my last client because they had this full list of features on the roadmap. And the first question that I asked them, okay, so what's the expected value out of every single feature? And they had nothing. And the next question, okay, so
these features that you have in your roadmap, how are they going to influence the whole growth model that you have in place? And they have no growth model. So there are certain aspects that you can tweak with and, you know, play with in order to extract the information that you need. It's not, I mean, a product will always, you know, evolve, and there will be a roadmap no matter what. I mean, if there's no roadmap, probably the product is stagnating or it is dying. So of course, people will work on new things and improve new things, but it's more of an approach. This is not replacing a roadmap, first of all. This is just bringing alignment on how the product will grow. And that's it. This is not even a prioritization. Prioritization comes after you define the input metrics and the North Star, and that's when you decide what will impact the most, the whole thing.
Thank you. I want to move to a question from YouTube. Based on the examples you provided, what I can derive is that the North Star might vary for different markets or different market segments. How do you deal with ambiguity? And so the same product might have different North Star metrics for different markets.
It is the same. Probably some segments will have a different behavior. We use behavioral cohorts and behavioral personas for that, you know, based on the behavior that people have with the product and not marketing persona. That's a different thing. But it's still the same. I mean, you will still need to activate people regardless that they are a segment or another one. You will only know if you have enough data, you will know that the particular segment is more, you know, lucrative than another. But the North Star metrics should stay the same. The only difference is, let me think about another example. So for Facebook, for Facebook feed and profiles, and then we have, you know, all the ad management part, or they have multiple products. They have multiple products now under their umbrella. You're not going to have one North Star metric. You're going to have a North Star metric, you know, think about the jobs to be done for your particular audience, and then start thinking about that. One client that I had recently, just to give you another example, he's working on an NFC tag platform for brands. So if I'm a winemaker, or I don't know, a jewelry maker or whatever maker, let's say this is my brand, this is my bottle. And if I, you know, just put a sticker with an NFC tag, my customers can scan them and they can get on a landing page and interact with my product, which is not a smart product. This is a physical product. So basically making a product smarter. So here we had two audiences, because the platform that he was working on was dedicated for the brand's marketing department, you know, getting insights and understand how people, you know, how their customers engage with the product. But we also have the end customer, which is me scanning the product and getting a landing page. We have two different experiences, and we had two different North Star metrics. And it was very tricky for me to explain that we need two, because he was pushing to have only one. But the job to be done is different for me as a marketer in working for a brand, and me as a customer scanning the product. We have different needs, different jobs to be done, even though my behavior will impact the marketer's, you know, results in the tool.
Yeah, I think it's a great insight that you already said before, and you repeated now with different examples, that per job to be done, there should be a North Star metric. And I think it's a good way to check how many there should be. Okay, more questions in the chat. Would you recommend this workshop also if you develop products together with and for clients? Maybe to have a shared and clear understanding from the beginning about what is important, or would you suggest other workshops or tools for this purpose?
So would you recommend this workshop also if you develop products together with, I mean, you should run this workshop if you have full alignment in your team or with your client, then probably you know what you have to do. But if you don't, and even if you do, you can always, you know, just give it a try and see if you're actually aligned with everyone. Yeah, you can run this workshop with your existing clients, with your team, internal teams. Even if you build this workshop together with your client, this product together with your client, that's fantastic. I don't see why this should be, I don't know, something that should exclude the idea of running a workshop.
One more question from Manuel. For projects that use regulation, for example, medical with FDA requirements or finance, how North Star helps to trace info between epics, features, requirements, stories, tech tasks, and documentations?
That's a very good question. Of course, a lot of products have regulations and they have rules, and there are certain laws that you need to respect, and that's perfectly fine. But let's not forget that a product will have users, always. And users will go through a certain flow in the product, and they will go through different stages in the product. And no matter what, you will still need to you understand the North Star metric, understand what drives, impact for your business. This is from a business perspective. And then you need to understand how that, is actually impacted further down the line with the input metrics that we just showed. And coming to the question, okay, so how the North Star metric helps to trace info between Epic's features requirements. This is just a personal preference of how you organize your information internally. This whole framework should not add more complexity to what you're doing, should actually simplify what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're only putting some measurements to what you're working on. Think about that. But also it helps you prioritize to see if what you're working on is actually going to be impactful or not.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Anna. With this, we will close the live streaming part. Let me quickly share this my screen for a bit to thank everyone who is watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch. Thank you for joining this. Please join on Zoom. There is a link now in the chat if you want to join us. We have another 10 or so minutes to interact in not recorded space. If you liked our event, please join next events. You can find us on Product Management People on Meetup. Join our chat at Get Product People on Telegram. And support us on Patreon if you want to help us run these events as regular as they are now and with the good tools. And big thanks to Anna for sharing her insights and detailed information.
Thank you.